It's not that I have some kind of special ability. This is what I look at is what every sales leader needs to be looking at on a daily basis. If you sold 20 homes a month, you could have sold 40. If you sold five, you could have sold 10, perhaps even more. You're either on the steamroller or you're under it.
Okay, John. So listen, man, I'm going to say something that's probably going to ruffle some feathers. Okay, but I really believe it. Most manufactured housing sales teams, they don't really have a sales problem, man. What they have is a leadership problem. And I think that the industry knows it, just nobody really wants to say it out loud. What do you think?
I agree with you 100%. And it's unfortunate because while it may ruffle some feathers, it also suggests that individuals who are offended by this, they may not be open to an outside-in perspective, and they're not necessarily open to discussing the monumental changes that are taking place in our industry as we speak.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true, right? And look, John, for those people that don't know you, okay, why don't you give us a short version, right? How'd you end up spending the last 30 years in the manufactured housing space? And what keeps you going? What keeps you in it?
At the end of the day, I love it. But let me just give you the highlights. After college, I started my sales career with a company called Motorola. And Motorola, as you probably know, they were a powerhouse in the communications field. And I was there when we transitioned from two-way communications to the cellular industry that we have today. And so, as you can imagine, we were undergoing some huge changes during that time there. Now, while I was in Motorola, I had some fantastic training. And aside from the corporate training, which they invested tons and tons of money in, I had a gentleman as a direct manager whose name was Wayne Grimm. And Wayne was a University of West Virginia basketball star. Then he came to Motorola. He was an outstanding motivator. He was an outstanding teacher. He always used sports analogies, just an all-around great guy. Couldn't say enough good things about him. And because of his coaching, I rose to number three in my region for Motorola at the end of my first full year. And so I wasn't unhappy about that. And I began to notice that I liked training just as much as I liked selling. I love to listen to people like Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Dale Carnegie, and more recently, a gentleman by the name of Michael Gerber. And I decided to form my own sales training company, and it was called SOS Seminars, which stood for the Science of Success. Now, I had six salespeople working for me. Basically, they filled up the seminars, and for some reason, they kept bringing in mobile home people. I said, guys, we've got people from Bank of America, we got people from Xerox, we got people from all these different industries. Why are we always getting the mobile home people? And they said, well, it's easy. It's an easy sale. They're not getting any training. So that kind of sparked a light in me. And I started looking into it. And at the time I was living in North Carolina. And I got introduced to the manufactured housing industry by way of Palm Harbor, and their plant was in Siler City. So I went down there, and I got to tell you, Cesar, I loved the product. I loved the people. I loved everything about the industry. So I started focusing exclusively on the MH industry, manufactured housing. And since then, I've worked as a sales manager for a North Carolina company as a single lot operation. We had nine salespeople, and they regularly sold 40 homes plus per month. I also worked as VP of sales for a Southwestern retailer with 8 locations, which we then sold to the Warren Buffett organization. So again, for the past 30 years, I've been working with retailers, communities, manufacturers on sales, marketing, and leadership development. I've loved every minute of it, honestly, and I've never looked back.
That's awesome, man. And I mean, the way that you got into it, I love that, right? I mean, you weren't. I probably would have thought the same thing, back in the
Yeah.
day, if I'd have been, where are all these people coming from? But what you mentioned, here's the sad part, man. This was several decades ago, and it's almost the same thing. Like there still is no training really in our industry, and I felt the same thing when I was in sales and as a GM. I'd look for other companies to do it. So I get it. That's an awesome way to get into it and start off. Now, in your experience, though, let me ask you, what's the single biggest change that you've seen really in what it takes to succeed in this industry compared to when you started?
That's a great question. And yeah, over the last 30 plus years, I have seen a lot of changes. But what's more interesting is that the most significant changes that are taking place right now as we speak, the changes that are taking place in our industry are bigger than anything I've ever seen. And again, going back to from an on the gravel perspective, I think the biggest challenge has always been that salespeople, they would get training, but it was kind of like, we it was kind of sporadic training. It was usually sponsored by manufacturers. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was usually geared towards either manipulative sales techniques or it was based on what manufacturers want salespeople to know about their product. What was the real challenge, though, is that the sales managers, the sales leaders, they received very little additional training, if any. And that leadership was and is still being left further and further behind, especially, Cesar, when you take a look at the changes that are taking place with our customer base, our marketing, and the actual sales processes that are required. Managers are simply not being equipped to handle these changes.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. And that's why I have my answer to this next question. I really want to hear yours, but when we're talking about most people in the industry becoming a sales manager or a general manager, some sort of management role, what does that path typically look like, in your opinion?
Well, that's really always been kind of a frustrating element, a frustrating aspect of our industry, and especially on the retail and as well as in the community side. But the truth is, most managers, they get their positions through one of two paths. It's either time that they spent and or performance. So the time,
There
time
you
is the
go.
guy or the gal that has been there longer and becoming a manager is almost a rite of passage. I've been here for 5 years. How come I'm not a manager yet? And then there's a performance person, and which again, I love performance, but that was an individual. I sold a lot of houses, and then the retailer would say, "Now go show the other guys how to do it." And we put this guy into these positions or this gal into these positions of sales leadership. We have high expectations, but we provide no additional training and no additional support. And selling and managing a sales team, we have to understand these are two separate sales, or excuse me, there's two separate skill sets, too many S's. So I mean, we've known this. It's been kind of a tongue in cheek for quite a while. We've always known that if you promote your best salesperson to management without giving them additional training and support, you literally just fired your best salesperson and you hired what is often inexperienced and an ineffective manager at best.
Yeah, and not to mention, right, the ineffective manager when it comes to systems, the processes, the running of the business. But then in my experience, it's been that person who was the top seller that became the manager, that became the sales manager, general manager. They also end up creating friction within the location, right? Because they're not prepared to actually manage people, which is
Absolutely.
really what managers are supposed to be. But yeah, anyway, that we both are on the same page when it comes to that. So, what do you think, or what is it that happens to a sales team when the leader doesn't have a system, when they haven't had that training, they really don't know both the business side of it and also how to actually run, inspire, lead, mentor a team of individuals.
Yeah, again, that when as we're talking about time here and how long we've all been in the business, I look back and this is a truth that hasn't changed very much, if at all. And one of the things I've always asked people to embrace is the concept that people do not run companies. Systems run companies, and people run the systems. And that's a direct quote from a gentleman by the name of Michael Gerber, who wrote a book called, he's written several books, but most people would know him through the E Myth. And the subtitle is um, why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it. He's one of the most brilliant small business minds of our time. I'm truly a disciple of the man, and it served me well. Now, when you going back to the question, when leaders lack systems, the first thing I think that goes is trust, because trust is lost because the systems are seen as paths to success. And you're in, if I'm not mistaken, you're currently in Arizona. I lived in Arizona, so let me give you a quick example. If you're hiking through the desert in Arizona, paths are absolutely critical, especially when the temperatures get up to 104. Now, paths are defined by boundaries, and they should be clearly marked. And when those are not marked and you can't see them, you don't have a process, you don't have a system. And then you either you have a path or panic. That was always my motto. If you've got no path, you're a wandering generality. And in the Arizona desert at certain times of the year, people die. So no systems, people panic quietly, infighting starts, morale deteriorates, there's no teamwork. And whenever I would take on a new client, I always looked at the leadership or the lack thereof. And no leadership, everything, if there's no leadership in place, everything else that you do is for naught. Hope
Yeah,
I said that right.
no, no, that sounds exactly spot on with what you said there, right? And yes, I am in Arizona today, so it's gonna be 108. I'll make sure I'm not even gonna go on some trails today. So,
Yeah.
but you've told me before, look, that you could walk on a sales lot, and within 15 minutes you could tell if that location has strong leadership. What is it that you're looking for when it comes to leadership?
Um, Again, great question. I just want to preface that by saying it's not that I have some kind of special ability. This is what I look at is what every sales leader needs to be looking at on a daily basis. It's what I call snapshot assessment. You take a slice of time out of the daily activities, and which is that what's happening right now as we speak. And that slice, upon closer examination, is going to tell you what has happened. It's going to tell you what is happening or is not happening. And unless you change some things, what's going to happen. And again, we have to have an important concept here is never confuse activity with accomplishment. Like the guy who got lost in the desert, walking faster isn't going to improve the outcome. Now, one of my less fun contracts that I would get as a consultant is closing down companies. They're going out of business. And the two most common reactions that I get from people are surprise and activity. And they're both surprised because everybody's really busy. So back to your question, what I look for in a company is the company, is it being busy or is it being productive? Let me give you some example. Leads. Is the company getting enough interested and qualified prospects to work with? If not, that's a marketing issue. Appointments. Are appointments being not only set, but are they being tracked? Are they being measured? And are those appointments being managed? And this pertains to individuals as well as the company overall. I look for opportunities. An opportunity is when I sit across the desk from a prospective buyer and I have the opportunity to turn that prospect into a buyer. I look for are those opportunities being created and identified? Is there a CRM, a customer relationship management system? Is it being used? And so many people say, "Oh, yes, we have one, John. It's not a problem." But the point is it being used consistently? Is it being used daily? And is it being used correctly and effectively? I look at salespeople's daily calendar. What is on your calendar for the next 10 working days? What does that look like in terms of sales activities? Are there scheduled appointments? Are there follow-up activities? I look for, is that person going to be busy for the next 10 days? If there's no appointments, if there are no activities, I'm just seeing a company I hear this thumping, and it's not my heartbeat, it's them dropping the ball because they're for every sale that they could be getting, they're not. I also look for top 10 top 10 prospects. Every salesperson should have a list of their top 10. Maybe it's eight, maybe it's seven. It doesn't have to be 10, but tell me who your top 10 prospects are and that you're working with right now. Are you intimately familiar with them? And do you have a game plan that you discussed with your sales leader? Right now, so many managers are listening. Oh, yeah. We do all that. If I landed on your sales center right now, could you prove it? Could you prove me that all these things are in place? 95% of the people could not. And that shows a lack of process, a lack of systems, or a lack of compliance, or both.
No, it's you're completely right. All of those things I see when we're out, on with our consulting clients as and it doesn't matter where it is, right? Everybody thinks we even have some in Texas, and everybody thinks that in Texas they do great because of the volume of sales and whatnot. But we see it in whether it's Texas or Arizona, or now we're in Washington State, right? All across the country, wherever we're at, it usually comes down to the leadership.
Well, let me ask you, Cesar, from your side, from your perspective, and it's, we deal in the same industry, we're looking at the same people. When you're consulting with companies, how often does the issue trace back to leadership rather than the sales team itself?
Okay, so obviously the sales team plays a role, right? But I
Sure.
come from the school of thought, and this is how I came up in the industry, especially the last 8 years of my career when I was over at Titan Factory Direct. And as a general manager, everything is your responsibility. That's just how my boss was. Like, if something went right, it's because of you. If something went
Right.
wrong, it's because of you. So you have to figure it out, right? So in my opinion, it always goes back to leadership. And how so? Somebody right now may be sitting there watching this and saying, "Well, Caesar, why would you say that?" Especially as a former GM. Well, the idea behind that is this. If my sales team is not performing, if they are skipping steps, if they're not handling the leads correctly, that's on me because that's part of managing a team. Like you mentioned,
Leading.
right? Are the leads being worked correctly? Is there a system in place for it? What's the marketing like? What happens when a buyer shows up? And how is that buyer being treated? What is being said? How do you show homes? Everything it has a system, it has a process in place. So my job as a general manager or sales manager is to make sure that those things are being done and holding people accountable to them. But if it's not happening, it comes back to me because of the lack of either the discipline, the accountability on my part for myself first. That's the one thing that I will say, John. We're saying that leadership plays a huge role in all of this, but I also believe this: nobody should have more expectations or higher standards for me than myself.
Sure.
So maybe there's a leader out there when I go and we're sitting there for the first time that hasn't even, like you mentioned earlier, hasn't even figured out, been taught or trained on what are the standards? Are those things documented? What you just mentioned, you said I love what you said about everybody might say they have these things, but can they prove it? And to me also is, do you have them documented so that your team understands them?
Yeah.
Or is it just, well, they should know they should do this? I agree, but it doesn't usually happen that way. So I would say 95% of the time, it always comes back to leadership.
Yep. Yeah. One of my favorite sayings, which was taught to me by a gentleman by the name of Steve St. John, who is retired now, but he was also a national trainer and a very, very good one. He said, people don't do what you expect. They do what you accept. But we actually, and that's a great, great, great statement, and it's absolutely true. But we got to step back a little bit and say, have you even told your people what you expect of them? And if you don't have a system, how can you pass that system? How can you hold them accountable to having a system and being compliant to a process that you don't even know yourself? So I know it's we're going around, we're kind of going around the same thing, but yes, I think sales teams are important. They have to be trained, but my God, leadership is just critical.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And so, we've been talking about the issues, right? The lack
Right.
of leadership or the lack of training for leadership and things of that nature. So I really want to talk about like, let's talk about the solution. Okay. If that typical path is broken, what does a well-led manufactured housing sales team actually look like? Could you paint that picture for us?
Well, let me take just a little bit of a digression here because I always believe that the sales team is nothing more than the reflection of the leader. So when you say what does the team look like, it looks like its leader. So let's see what an effective leader would look like. And
Yep.
and that's good. That's a good conversation because now we're getting into solutions. First and foremost, effective sales managers or leaders, they have to focus on activities versus results. Now, to some people that can get to be confusing because we're always looking for results. But we got to understand that results are historical by nature. Those things have already happened, and so therefore they can't be changed. Activities, on the other hand, those are the things that we do specifically on a daily basis that leads us to a specific result or outcome. And and an ineffective management question as an example would be, so how much did we sell this month? Whereas an effective sales leader question is, what sales activities do we need to complete today, tomorrow, this week, next week, and the rest of the month to get us to the sales that we want to get? Effective sales organizations have daily pursuit meetings. Pursuit means the term pursuit implies that we're focused on prospects only. We're not talking about who's coming in to choose colors. We're not talking about who's coming to do a payment. We're talking about focusing on those people that have indicated interest and have not yet pulled the trigger. And we need to start that every every day. Funny, I say people, you got to have daily pursuit meetings. What? How often do I have to have them? Well, the name suggests you have to have them daily. So you we start by focusing. It's I mean, and again, Cesar, you've been in management a whole lot more recently than I have. And you know more than certainly more than I do that managers, they've got a lot on their plate. They got a lot of stuff to do. And that's but it by saying that, we also have to realize let's not let all these other things take priority over the fact that we have to sell. Because when we stop doing that, then everything else that you do becomes irrelevant. So I always ask them to start the day with focusing on who's the next person that we're going to help into a new home. And again, I think we also have to realize that salespeople, they spend a significant part of their day doing either one of two things. They work with an opportunity that's in front of them, or they're on the phone making appointments with their next opportunities. Now, I understand, again, I'm not trivializing the fact that salespeople have other things to do, and those other things that they have to do are important. But we've got to understand those other things, while they are important, they're not sales activities. They're management or managerial or transaction management. They might be financing issues that they have to help. And we want to make sure, but big part of leadership is keeping your people focused on what's important, focused on the right activities, and focused on the right clients. That's what they're supposed to be doing.
No,
That was a
yeah,
bit
that's
long-winded.
that's so true, man. So with all that being said, right, you talk a lot about the differences between managing and leading. So could you break that down for somebody in the industry right now that may be watching this right now? What is that difference between being a manager and being a leader, according to John?
According to John, actually, that's,
The book
you
of
know,
John.
that's that is actually probably one of the most common questions that I get. And the what we have to understand is that management and leadership are not the same thing. You don't become good at one by learning how to do the other. They're separate and apart things. They may be connected at the hip, they may overlap, but they're not the same thing. Management, the simplest way for me to explain it, and it's easiest for people to understand, is management. Excuse me. Management is about data. It's about facts. It's about figures. It's about projections, KPIs, margins, etc. So here's the bottom line. If it's expressed on a spreadsheet, it's most likely a management issue. Leadership, on the other hand, is on the other end of the spectrum. It's about feelings. It's about emotions, and it's about building corporate culture. Let me give you an example. If your pull-through ratio, which we can talk about later, is, let's say, it's 4% lower than where it should be, that's a management issue. If your lead activity is down by 8% for the month, that's a management slash marketing issue. If your people lack motivation, enthusiasm, and are not working as a team, that's a leadership issue. And here's what's important. Effective sales leaders need to be good at both. If you're a good manager, but you lack leadership skills, then your team is going to lack cohesion. There'll be infighting. There'll be people will become self-centered, and they'll actually start becoming dishonest. And it's all to make the numbers look good, because that's what we'd be focused on. We call it a death spiral.
Mhm.
And if you have leadership skills, but you lack in data management, you don't have access to the right data, or you don't know what that data tells you and how to influence it, then you can't implement systems and KPIs to correct it. And your team may like you, but they're not going to necessarily have confidence in you that you can show them the way. And isn't that what leadership is all about? It's showing them the way. I mean, at the end of the day, we got to understand, no one wants to sing Kumbaya as they're going broke, right?
I love that. It's true, right? And earlier you mentioned the daily, what did you call it? Daily something meetings, pursuit, right?
Pursuit.
Pursuit meetings.
Yep.
And that's something I come from. We had so many systems in place over at Titan, right? That were implemented. And one of those was just that, relaying the data on a daily basis every morning to the sales team. But you're right. When that salesperson, when there was that sales consultant that was lagging behind, not putting in the activities, and then I, as a manager, wasn't really leading that person to get them back on track, they would then in turn start fudging the numbers, right? So it
Yep.
looked different than
Yep.
what the reality was. And then that person ends up, just falling way behind as far as fundings and obviously their personal income. And it starts that death spiral. So being able to both manage and lead are crucial. And the knowing the difference between the two is huge, right? So if a sales manager or general manager was listening to this right now
Hmm.
and they wanted to start making a shift from managing to leading, what's the first thing that they should be doing tomorrow morning?
Okay. Um, that's relatively easy. There's three things, and you just mentioned one of them again. Focus on your top 10 prospects. And I use the word top 10. There's a top 10 list. Sometimes your salesperson is only going to have 8 people on there. Sometimes they'll only have 5. What I want them to have is top 10, no more than 10. I don't, I hear, and I think you experienced this yourself, Cesar, and I'm digressing a bit, but it's important, is I hear so many salespeople say, I've got 387 prospects that I'm working with. Really now, how often are you calling them? Well, but they're in my database. Listen, give me a salesperson with between 5 and 10 prospects that he's intimately familiar with, that the manager's intimately familiar with, and they will compete against anybody else on the strip because they're focused on the right people. So number one, have your top 10 prospect list for your salespeople on it, and have pursuit meetings on a daily basis. Get involved with your salespeople and their prospects. I mean, here's something that we got to understand. The Generally speaking, at least I hope it is, the most competent person on the lot is the manager. Why would you want that person not to put his hands on every file that involves a prospect, right? Okay, so number two, always discuss, plan, and schedule, and hear me on this one, the next step. Okay, if nothing else happens, it's going to keep your activity calendar full. So many managers, they discuss with the people, but then they discuss their clients and say, and it's kind of like, oh, what are you going to do with them? Oh, I'm going to stay in touch with them. No, what is the next event that needs to happen? When is it supposed to happen? And is it scheduled? In other words, did you put it in the CRM? And if people start doing this, they're going to find over about 2 to 3 months, they're going to, no, it's not even going to take that. It'll take 30 days. And their calendar is going to fill up with the best prospects and things that they need to do. The third thing I would say is use a CRM always. Always be looking into the activities that your salespeople either are or are not completing. And is that looking over their shoulder? Yes, it is. That's part of leadership. Do people like it? Not always. But again, like we talked about earlier, Cesar, if people begin to trust you and they know that everything that you're doing is to help them become more successful, they'll gladly do it. So, and one of the five fundamental functions of leadership is to keep their people focused. Again, I said that before, keep them focused on what's important and avoid them focusing on things that are not.
Yeah, very, very true. I keep saying that, right? But it's you're dropping so much knowledge here and a lot of truth with regards to what leadership really is, what the role is, and I love the fact that you can break it down between leadership and management and how they go hand in hand, but they are different. So, you've been doing this now for over 30 years. Why is it that most leaders don't change, even though they know what they should be doing?
I think that's a fairly complex issue. But I think if I was going to say one thing, why don't they change? It's simply because they don't know how. We talked about how people advance to leadership positions or management. See, they're put in a management position and they're faced with leadership issues, and they may think they know how to do them, but they don't. And the numbers typically will confirm my assertion. The second thing is we have to understand is that not knowing is not their fault. Most of these people have been placed in position with awesome responsibility. I mean, you think about it, you get a high performing lot, and it's not unusual for a lot to do 10, 12, 13, $15 million a year. And that sales manager, that sales leader, that is the only person that's making that happen until that person and his team or her team, until they do what they're supposed to do, everybody else is just waiting for somebody to sell something, right? So we put these people in this awesome responsibility. We have high expectations. Virtually no investment has been made in training and development. And to make matters worse, we expect them then to admit that they need help, which is often understood as, I don't know how to do my job. How could you know how to do your job? And why don't people simply recognize that our business environment is changing? And in order to navigate these waters, these sales leaders, they're going to need training and they're going to need support. How can we hold people accountable to comply with, measure, and manage systems that have never been put in place?
That's so true. It as we go through this conversation, I can't help but think back to when because I just left the industry or left being at a retail location in 2023 to start MH Sales Mastery. And I think back to my career, and I'm one of the main reasons why I left to start this company, to be able to do what we're doing now, you and I, and everything else that we do, is because I felt that gap as a leader. I did sales. I did sales for a lot of years in the industry, and then I was sales manager and I was general manager. But part of me knew I was failing because I knew that not that we were thriving, we were doing great as this location, but as a leader, because that certain things are put on the general manager to be able to get done, but they're not doing them, right? Like the training of the team and
Yeah.
things of that nature. So what you're saying is so spot on, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what leads me to my next question. Because sometimes I would be looking for ways to improve in both my management and leadership. Do you really think that leaders in our industry can develop themselves, or do you think that they need some outside structure of some sort?
Um, Let me first, you said something that just really resonated with me. One of the key indicators to a person that if let me back up a little bit. If I was having a conversation with someone and the question or the task that I was given is help us determine if this person is going to be a good business leader, is he going to be a good manager, is he going to be a good leader? When a person says to me, well, I've been watching this and which is literally what you're saying, I am aware of the amount of business that I'm missing because I'm not as competent as I could and should be. That is that's a unique perspective. Very few people ask it. Most people say the same thing. Oh, we're doing the best that we can, or we're selling all that we can. It's a unique individual, and I just applaud you for saying that is when you recognize that you're not there's more business to be had out there. And I could talk about that for another half hour. I won't. But so, can they do it without outside intervention? Well, to say no would be disingenuous because I think there are people that have done it, and not often enough, but it has been done. And I think case in point for yours was some. And I mean, you did work for a company that they certainly had some leadership and some processes and systems. But when you're in one of those companies and you realize, but we could be doing more, that
Yeah.
was good. So there was a time when there were very few documented systems in our industry. So someone had to develop those systems. So it can be done. But even more important, the systems that you need, that what you need today they've already been developed, they've been tested, and they've been proven to be highly effective. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so I would ask a leader who's wrestling with, oh, I think I can do this on my own. I would say, well, 95% of the people fail at this, but if you want to take a shot at it on your own, do. But I would ask a leader this. I would say, if you want to increase your efficiency and your effectiveness, let me ask you, the first question I would ask you to consider is how long is your runway? In other words, how much time do you have to show the results that you need to show? The longer the runway, the more time you have. The shorter the runway, the more outside help I would seek. And this is not always predicated on what's happening just in your company. This is predicated upon what's happening in the industry. And right now, I would throw a cautionary flag up to anyone and say, listen, the runway ain't as long as you think. I think right now we are undergoing changes in this industries, the manufacturers, and maybe we can get together and have a discussion on this again in the future. But the manufacturers have recognized it. The only people that aren't recognizing it are the retailers. And the amount of time that you have to produce is not as long as you think. The second question I would ask someone to consider is how much business will you lose while you're trying to figure all this out on your own? I know this 90% of the dealerships that I've worked for or worked with over the past 30 plus years, I can literally tell you, Cesar, that for every transaction that they closed, there was at least one more that I could identify that they should have closed. Just think about that. So if you sold 20 homes a month, you could have sold 40. If you sold five, you could have sold 10, perhaps even more. And
Yes.
that's what I think leaders need to focus on. And I would say, based on what's happening in the industry, you need to get busy.
Yeah. Nothing drives me more crazy than when I speak to somebody, whether it's at a show, a trade show, or somehow we come in communication. And they'll ask me about what we do, how we do things of that nature. And then they say, oh, well, that's okay. Well, my team's, they're doing 20, 25 homes a month. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, with the way business is, the way the market is, the lack of inventory of housing all throughout the country, when you say something like that, obviously you're missing the vision and the bigger picture, because if you're doing 20, 25, like you said, you could be doing 40 or 50 if you just had and it's not about doubling the amount of the team. It's
Exactly.
a lot of it has to do with these systems and these processes and the leadership and the managing, right? And the accountability, which a lot of folks don't like, especially in today's day and age, is it's a big deal, right? So with that being said, what is the role of peer accountability, right? And is that something that you've seen that works in this industry?
Yeah, I absolutely have. I mean, most people are aware of what used to be called dealer 20 groups, mastermind groups. I've been involved with mastermind groups literally since the beginning, and the reason being was fortuitous in that the person who brought me into the industry, that introduced me to Palm Harbor, et cetera, he was also a consultant in the industry, and he ran dealer 20 groups. So what we have to understand is that sales leadership is basically, it's a lonely job because you're in a company, you're the guy with all the responsibility. It's like you're on your own. And listen, one thing I know is most sales leaders, they know they're not selling all that they could be selling. They know that their salespeople are not as successful as they could be. They know that unsold prospects are walking off the sales center every day, and people that could have bought but didn't. And they also want to be successful. And where's the training, the knowledge, and the system supposed to come from? So they can watch it on YouTube. I mean, there's plenty of information out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But let's remember, their job is to sell more videos, not to help you sell more homes. So peer groups are really the best way for most professionals to learn quickly. You join a group of people that are in they're in the same space as you are. They're facing the same challenges. They're facing the same headwinds that you're facing. And these groups are typically led by professionals and subject matter experts, which ensure that the discussions are going to be moving, they're moving along, they're productive, and they're on task. But in my experience, you learn just as much, if not more, from the people that you're actually in the group with, that are participating in the discussions. And now, like I said, groups like this have been around for many, many years. And what's interesting is the membership in these groups. Once these people get together and they have a brain trust, they stay with that group for sometimes 10, 12, 15 years. And I know that for anything to last more than a year today is incredibly impressive. Second, I would look for some one-on-one coaching. You look at the world's best golfers, the world's best athletes, and the world's best investors. They all have people in their brain trust. They all have coaches on specific things. And again, over just a few of these sessions, you begin to develop that brain trust, that group of people, and those people have a vested interest in your success. They don't want to see you fail. So yes, I think peer accountability, it takes the loneliness out of the job. I mean, just think you're in a group with 15 people. That's 15 more people bringing you information and experience that you currently don't have. I mean, we're
Right.
we're both good trainers, but we can't come up with that many that quickly, with that many answers, can we?
No, I agree 1,000%. And that's why I wish they would have had those dealer 20 groups when I was involved, or maybe I just didn't know about them, up in here in the 2000s, 2010s, and 20s. But because I had to look for it outside, I was a part of mastermind groups, but it wasn't industry specific, right? It was always with some sort of sales coach or even a business coach that I was part of these groups. I hired, I went as far as hiring sports psychologists to come and talk to my sales teams so that they understood
Yeah.
competition and having that fire. We got to keep going because, like you said, there's always more we could get. Yes, we did great, but we could have done this, right? And so I that's the thing about it. So things are changing. The industry
Mhm.
is growing, even though some people right now would would say differently, right? Just because it's not that it's not growing, it's just harder because of the buyers that are out there. But that's a sales thing, that's a sales training thing, right? So the industry is growing. There's more buyers, there's more communities, there's more need, there's more competition. So, what does that mean, John, for leadership demands going forward in 2026 and beyond?
Okay, now you said a little while ago when we first started, you said, I'm going to ruffle some feathers. Now I'm going to ruffle some feathers because I'm going to break it down a little bit because I don't agree that the manufactured housing industry, the business model as it's always been, is growing. In fact, I see it's shrinking. I see it's a dying business model. And let me explain why. If you think about it, currently, just think about this, while the factory built housing industry, we've never built a better product. We've never offered more design flexibility. And we literally own the term affordable housing, the demand for which is at an all-time high. Now, why is it that we never ever seem to exceed 10% of all new housing starts? Why? And it's because and here's where let me just say this before people get alarmed. The conventional, historical, traditional MH business model is dying, but it's being replaced by something that has infinitely more opportunity than what you're currently faced with. Listen to this. For every one manufactured housing buyer, there are at least 10 buyers that are looking for a single family home that they can afford, one that they can perhaps place on their own property, and one that gives them all of what they want while staying within a budget.
Mhm.
Guys, that's everything that we sell. That's a huge gap. The problem is that these buyers are looking at site built homes and they're not even considering factory built housing. They aren't coming to your dealership. They're not experiencing your home. And we as an industry and as retailers, we aren't reaching those buyers. And to you, the retailer, you think about it, these buyers are invisibles. You don't know who they are and they don't know who you are. And here's how it ties back to leadership. The sales leader for any retail location or locations, plural, is responsible for the growth of that business. And they will never grow their organization so long as they're competing for a shrinking pool of manufactured home buyers. You know, the ones that visit your sales center, if you're focusing on them, you're never going to grow the business. The buyers you need to reach, that single family conventional site built home buyer doesn't shop like that. They don't go to sales centers. Manufacturers have already figured it out. Listen, manufacturers have begun to realize that in order for our industry to grow, they're going to have to sell to that single family home buyer. And they're working with site developers, they're working in the real estate world. And that presents, while that may be some bad news to some, that presents one of the biggest opportunity for retailers probably since the inception of our industry. You don't have to become a single family home builder. You just have to market and sell to single family home buyers. It's not difficult. You just have to know what to do. And all of the training that we provide is focused that we provide, that you provide, it's focused on adapting to these new changes. And they are different. We have to realize that the conventional site built single family home buyer, they buy differently, they shop differently, they think differently, they evaluate, they look at their acquisition as a process. We look at it as somebody coming in, and our big thing is let's get a deposit. Let's get a deposit on a home. That's not how these people think. Now, here's the thing. If you can dial into this and if you can figure that out, how to do that and do it quickly, the world is your oyster. That's all I can say. And I don't
Yeah.
know, honestly, Cesar, I don't know that I've been more passionate about anything than I have about that topic. And the reason being is because it would be heartbreaking to see retailers being left behind when there's no reason for it, when they could be not just surviving, they could be thriving.
Driving. I could not agree more, right? And you mentioned that 10% of the market. That's what I tell everybody, whether I'm sitting in front of them, where I'm speaking somewhere, that 10% is going to be there. It's going to
Yep.
be there. Now, it's harder though to sell that 10% because of where pricing and interest rates are, because they aren't used to that. And so they aren't coming back and buying as much as they used to. And so that's where some of these retailers have lost some of that traction. But who's picking it up? Like you mentioned, the developer, the builder developer that's coming into the market, communities are picking up more sales because
Yes,
it's
they
more
are.
familiar to that buyer who can't buy the site built home. They're great. They love the pricing, the price point of our product. The communities and the builder developer are more familiar to them than what a retail location would be. And that's why the retailer could be thriving if they
Mhm.
started to accept and go work towards getting some of that same business themselves. But it takes better leadership, it takes better management, right? So let me ask you really quick, what as we start to wrap up here, what separates the companies that you've seen succeed long term versus the ones that just plateau? They're here and we're good. We do what we do.
Um, I think we find that the same answer across any company, any industry across the board. We have to understand that change is very natural. Industries and markets constantly evolve. And right now, that evolution in our business, in our space, is just happening a little quicker than perhaps in the past. Long-term success is and always will be tied directly to your ability to adapt to the changes that are taking place around you. If you're willing to look at the market and look at the data and let that data tell you what it's intended to tell you, and then adapt, you're going to do infinitely better. The people that are going to die, the ones that are, you know, I've always said, you know, and you gotta make sure that you're looking at the changes taking place and not sitting back and saying, we've always done it that way. That's how people die. Making sure that you have the systems in place that direct your activities to take you to the outcome that you're looking for and that's possible. One thing I will leave this with all of you is that adapt or die. That's the universal ultimatum. And your business, your enterprise is no exception.
I know for sure. That makes complete sense, right? So look, John, we could speak about this for hours, right? I mean, it's a topic that is crucial. It's a topic that just has so much more meat to it. And I do believe that we've got to do a follow-up episode, because I think we just started to scratch surface, and whoever watches
Yep.
probably like they're hanging on to it because they know, and some of them it may sting because they know it applies. But the great people out there, it's going to sting, but they're going to say, "Hey, what can I do?" Right? And so I want to mention something for those people that are listening, that are watching, that felt like some of this conversation was describing their situation, because everything that we talked about today, the leadership gap, the need for structure, the power of accountability, that's exactly why we built the Certified Sales Leadership Professional Program, right? It's the first leadership certification designed specifically for our industry. John, you're leading it, right? The first
Mhm.
group starts July 2nd. We've
Yep.
limited the amount of people in it because we want to make sure that everybody gets as much as they possibly can. We're capping it at 20 people. And so if something that we talked about today resonated with you folks out there watching this, listening to this, the next step would just be a quick evaluation with John. He's going to have a conversation with you about where you are, whether it's the right fit for you. We're not here to pressure, not here to hard sell anyone. It's just going to be a conversation between two people who care about the industry. And we're going to put the link to that call in the notes of this podcast. So go there and click on it. So, John, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate your time. I know we're across different time zones and all of these, but we make it work, right? And so I want you to just, if you can, and you have one last minute thought that you want to share with everybody on the importance of leadership and why they should consider getting on that call with you and be a part of this certified sales leadership program.
Um, well, I would say the most important step towards doing anything is the first step, isn't it? And I would say to anybody, look, I don't, you're not, we're not giving you a sales pitch here. Um, I would say the best thing to do is just go to the website at mhsalesmastery.com, click on the leadership link, and then let's schedule a conversation. And look, we can talk about anything and everything that the good Lord laid on your heart. I may not always have an immediate answer, but together we can certainly make progress and move forward. If there's a fit, we'll know it. If not, I promise you, you'll still walk away with some great ideas. Because one thing I know is that both Cesar and I think you can sense our passion. I think you can still sense our love for the industry, and there's not that many people that seem to have that left. But one thing I will tell you is we're all committed. We're both committed, and our teams are committed to doing all that we can do to help you succeed. There's no reason why anyone should not just survive, but thrive, and we can help you with that.
For sure. Well, John, again, thank you. We're going to do it again very soon. I look forward to the first cohort starting off July 2nd and being a part of those calls with you. So you have a great day. Everybody out there watching, go click on the link, get on a call with John, and let's help take your leadership to a whole new level.